Glenstone, the Broad, like much of like the collecting was happening then. A lot of people are looking at auctions to find deals right now. I mean, pure liquid, this is a time to buy.
I'm Andrew Russeth, and this is The Art Angle, a podcast by ArtNet News. I'm thrilled to be able to say that the latest edition of ArtNet's Intelligence Report, the Mid-Year Review 2025, has been published. It's free for all comers. Head to ArtNet News to download it as a handsome PDF. Within its covers, you'll find a bounty of information on the auction world and the art industry. Which artists have been having a great year, how various countries' markets are performing, and a great deal more. Surprises abound, from the old masters to the ultra-contemporary. You'll also find interviews with power players from the field, like the Guggenheim Museum's chief, Mariette Westermann, and the widely admired, now retired art dealer, Jack Hanley. And then there is the cover story by our ace columnist, Katya Kazakina. It's titled, "The Storm Hits the Art Market. Who's Getting Swept Away?" It looks at recent upheavals in the art industry, with galleries closing and everyone spending the summer thinking about how to run an art business now. There are tales of crash-outs and heartening new models. There's something for everyone. I'm thrilled to have Katya on the Art Angle podcast after she pounded the pavement at openings for exhibitions all over New York City. All right, welcome to the Art Angle. Katya, thank you for coming on. How are you doing?
Thanks so much for having me. I'm doing well.
Good to hear. We are here convening because the ArtNet Intelligence Report just came out, and you've written the cover story, "The Storm Hits the Art Market," which has been making the rounds. It's much discussed, much debated. Before we delve in completely to what you found through your reporting, I thought we might take a little step back and talk about just how it came about and what this summer, as you were working on it, you were thinking about. You originally came with a very different idea. And I should say, to kind of tee it up, "The Storm Hits the Art Market." The headline is sort of self-explanatory. It's about how people are grappling with the downturn. But what were you originally thinking about this summer?
To be honest, I wasn't thinking about the story at all because, all through last year, I would say there's been this narrative that maybe we hit the bottom, that maybe the downturn is turning around. I was sort of tired of writing these doom and gloom stories.
Sure.
And I think after the last auction cycle, several people mentioned to me like how these collections come together and the idea of patience that collectors need at this moment more than money, even sometimes, in building their collections that are very significant. And I was intrigued by this idea, and I kind of thought that it might be a big enough umbrella to write something very different and maybe, frankly, softer. And then I started reporting kind of end of July, early August. And my big surprise, all the conversations I started having with people were really more about how difficult it is on the ground, and advisors and collectors and galleries. And it was kind of like a strange situation because I wasn't really looking for this narrative at all. My mind was somewhere completely different. And in the past 2 years, where I've been kind of reporting this out fairly diligently, I think there was some pushback. I would say people kind of didn't want to engage in the beginning. They didn't think that this downturn was serious. But in this case, this summer, what really surprised me that like something shifted, and all of a sudden, this narrative, there was some kind of like understanding and embrace of where the art industry is. And there was acceptance, almost like a self-evident acceptance that we are in a very serious downturn, and it's going to get worse, that we're not bottoming out. And the tenor of these conversations really surprised me because there was kind of hopelessness in a way that I haven't encountered before. People just didn't know what comes next. There was acknowledgement that the system doesn't work, that what was built somehow is much bigger than the demand that exists at the moment. But people didn't know how to maybe come out of it and what's on the other side. And that really surprised me. And I think that that's when I came to you and I said, Andrew, I think we need to tell a different story.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there was that moment, just as you were talking to sources, getting together what you were going to tackle in this story, Olivier Babin, founder of Clearing Gallery, decided to close and gave you what I thought was really one of the most remarkable interviews I've read with an art dealer before.
Thank you.
This is early August. For people who aren't familiar, Olivier had run the gallery for what? It was 13 years or so?
It's 2011. He started
Yeah.
in Bushwick. He was an artist and he wasn't happy with what was happening with his art career or artwork. And he started showing work of his fellow friend and artist, Karl Enkart. They were both in Bushwick in the studio. And so that's how the gallery started. And he became like one of the top emerging art galleries in the world for a period of time. Very gregarious guy. He recently expanded to New York, to Manhattan from Bushwick, and parties, shows, very like vibrant scene. And so there have been like rumors. I think people have been talking that something is changing. I think our colleague Annie Armstrong, she was passing by at some point this summer and saw like that the space had like a pop-up, something unrelated to art. Anyway, that he came out on Instagram and he said that he's closing the gallery. And that was a big shock, but also not just because of his gallery, but because it followed several other, or well, I guess what happened right before, right? Blum closed,
Yes.
and then Venus over Manhattan closed. And then Olivier said that he is closing. And I think right before Olivier, Casman closed. So it was like kind of a drum beat of these closures of prominent galleries. And I called him right away because sort of a story behind the story. But I would just remember that over the years, I would talk to people. Like I remember I had conversation with Team Gallery and like really in-depth, interesting conversations. But because of where I was at the time, there wasn't really the appetite of this kind of in-depth Q&A. And then Andrew Goldstein did those interviews. And I was always so jealous because he did such a great job. And I felt like this was very valuable. I think I always found those kind of exit interviews very valuable. And I learned a lot from them, but I also kind of felt like I was sitting on this very similar material and I wasn't able to publish it. And so when Clearing said that they're closing, I was like, okay, I'm not going to make this mistake again. I really need to talk to him. And so I called him and he said, give me a day, call me tomorrow. I need to talk to my PR manager. And so I called him the next day and I didn't expect him to be so open. Didn't really know what he was going to say. And then we talked for almost 2 hours as he kind of roamed the Lower East Side. It was incredible material. And remember, it was on Friday, which is when my column usually comes out. And I said, I have to write it up, like right away.
Drop everything and
everything and just write it up.
Crash this, yeah.
And we totally crushed it. It came out. It was amazing. But, I left, again, a lot of material on the cutting room floor. And so I knew where my head was at the time already with this intelligence report story, that it really fit into this narrative too, because it kind of really exemplified this struggle that I think a lot of galleries are having.
I wanted to bring it up because you opened the piece for the cover story. You opened the cover story with Olivier. And I was happy you did that because my sense is it really struck a nerve, that story, for a few different reasons. I mean, I think one was that he's 50 now, but he'd come up, as you said, over the last 14 years from Bushwick, opening in LA, moving to New York, out of Brooklyn. He represented this whole group of artists, Kelvin Marcus, Korka Darunduchai, Zach Kitnick. I mean, really interesting people who were kind of coming up with him. And you think, this is someone who's doing Basel, who's doing all of the right fairs. And yet he talks really candidly about the sort of structural problems that many people have been complaining about. There's one quote I wanted to read to kind of tee up what I think you're getting at in your article. He says, with Basel, you can't get away with spending less than $80,000 for a small booth. We'd come back from a fair and we'd sit down with the bookkeeper. So how was it? I was like, it was great. And then we'd look at the numbers and realize that it felt greater than it was. The numbers were not great. They were okay, but not great. And he essentially walks through there's the massive expense that goes into doing these fairs, running these galleries with overhead. And he was not even by any means the largest operation in town. You see galleries with huge staffs, branches all around the world. Tell us about why that felt like a case study to open up with and kind of the structural things you encountered in your reporting.
Well, I think that there's been a lot of talk over many years about the pressure and the burden and the kind of this love-hate relationship, maybe not love-hate relationship with fairs, but what art fairs have become to galleries and the role they play in the whole ecosystem. But the main thing is that they're very expensive for galleries. And they are very prestigious. That's where collectors go. That's where they meet curators and buyers. And, for a lot of galleries, and there's a lot of data, art fairs represent a huge chunk of their revenue. So Art Basel obviously is the pinnacle. So everybody is trying to get into Art Basel, and like younger galleries, sometimes they are in like a section, a particular small section, and then they kind of gradually move up sometimes to the main section. But either way, it's like very, very expensive for them to do it. And I think that this anecdote kind of seemed relevant because for a small gallery not to do well in Basel after putting in so much money into this endeavor could be very difficult. Like we kind of entered year 4 of this contraction. And I date this based on my reporting, the contraction to right after Basel in 2022. This contraction was very initially kind of quiet and not well understood. I understood it only a year later when it kind of manifested itself at an auction. There was a Feinberg auction at Christie's. But then when I started talking to my sources about this, they said, well, actually, it started a year earlier. So clearing got into Basel, did several Art Basels, Miami Basel, and then that quote that you just read, that it was good, but it felt better than it actually was. So this year, what was interesting, I remember, and you probably remember, right? Like a week before Basel, suddenly this email came saying that they're not doing Basel, but they're renting this maison, this house very close to the fair, and they're going to show their program in that house. I wasn't in Basel, but you were, so you went there, right?
Yeah, it was great. Really cool.
But it was different, right? Like it was a very different setting. I saw pictures, the art was in the staircases, in the attic, in the basement. There was a big courtyard with long tables, and they were barbecuing and partying. It was like a very lovely kind of a environment. I don't know, I wasn't there, but
No, that perfectly captures it. I think we're staying there as well. As you said, they were having dinners, but every inch that you could use to show art, they were using. It really felt like a super ambitious renegade guerrilla move outside this giant convention center. And then it ended up kind of looking like a Hail Mary pass that it just wasn't enough, as your reporting found.
And he said, and Olivier told me, he said, this was like really a striking situation, which I think frustrates a lot of people right now, and maybe gets a lot of pushback against this narrative, is that, he told me they got great press, they had really good sales, it was a success. However, and he said, and it really struck me, that the hole in which they were standing was too deep, and it just wasn't enough to get him out of there. And just to see like how deep, like on one level, almost immediately, concurrently with this announcement of closing the gallery, his landlord filed a lawsuit against the gallery saying that it owed him like $400,000 in rent. And it was rent and it was fees and taxes and whatever, but it was like the whole thing. It's a lot of money.
So you get this sense of just these structural, these fixed costs. The fairs is one part of it and the cost of doing business at that level. But then it's also having the real estate, having the overhead for staffing, payroll.
Insurance, shipping, everything. I mean, shipping is killing everyone right now.
Yes.
It's a whole other story, which we could investigate. But anyway, and so it felt just like very sad, right? Like you put in so much into this and you give it your best shot, and it's just not enough.
Yeah.
So that's why I thought that that really captured the current zeitgeist on many levels.
Yes. And right now, as you said, and you write this in the story, that the circumstances of all these closures are very different. But there is this sense of upheaval. There is this sense of people really trying to rethink how to go about doing the business of running an art gallery, marketing artists' work. And you look at a few alternative models, one being Leo Koenig. But talk us through what you saw, how people are responding to this moment of these high costs, these difficulties of doing business, a tough economic environment. How are people pivoting?
Well, like some people are closing. Some people who are not closing, they're downsizing. And so let's say if like galleries have multiple spaces, it seems like in the last month, I've heard a lot of news coming out of LA, like small galleries either closing there or subleasing. Like the Whole is looking to sublease its space in LA. Also in New York, already after we filed this story, and we covered that Canada Gallery subleased its space. It had two spaces in Tribeca. It had a main space and then an annex across the street. And so Max Levi is going to take over the ground floor of that space. So Canada is downsizing. We've heard just today, right, that Hannah Hoffman and Bridget Donahue are merging. We also heard two galleries, right, moved in together on the Lower East Side also last month. So I think people are doing just like how to cut costs. Like maybe this is funny in a way, but during the Armory show, there weren't many big parties. People are cutting down on entertainment.
I think it's an important indicator. You're seeing less of that super public after party thing. Things are just
Yes,
scaled back a little bit. Yeah.
right, right. And then some interesting things, I guess. Leo Koenig, who opened his gallery, he was young in his 20s. He opened the gallery in 1999 on the Lower East Side, and then for many years had a space in Chelsea. So I kind of checked in with him just because I remember when I started reporting about the art market when initially it was just coincidentally the New Yorker wrote a big profile of him.
Great story.
It
Yeah.
was a great story called The Salesman. Just have known him forever. And so I wanted to check in with him. He opened a space in May in Andes. It's like a tiny town in the Catskills. And so he's doing something interesting. Like he still has a space on some upper floor on Madison Avenue on the Upper East Side. But he said like very few people come to that space. And he said like he realized that he needs a phone and his
Yeah.
contact list to be a dealer, right? Like he doesn't need to be sitting in that place where nobody comes to. And so he opened the space in the Andes and is trying to turn it into like this destination for collectors. He invites his customers to come for a weekend. He hosts them. There are dinners. They go hiking. They go fishing. They go to Deer Beacon. They have this really nice time. Artists come up. They look at art, and they also have a good time. And sort of within those parameters, he sells the work. And he said that his dollars go way farther when he's out there. It's also just like something else about an experience that is a lot less hurried and that is more personal and intimate in some way. And he kind of said that that works for him. But then, in addition to this, he was kind of thinking about having that space from May through October. And then from November until the spring, he goes to Palm Beach, where he has the space and storage and where a lot of very wealthy people go for the summer. And so he said that most of his revenue is done for the year there. So you have like kind of triangulation, basically, like that model, which is interesting.
Smart. Yeah. That he's really worked out these different ways of bringing in clients. I mean, he's someone who has had spaces all over. He's done the big Chelsea thing, he's done the Brooklyn thing, and now it's upstate and it's Palm Beach and Upper East Side. Thinking about the kind of argument you're making in the story and what your reporting was showing you, it's partially the structural issue. It's the cost of doing business, which Leo's kind of tackling by doing this interesting model. And then, of course, it's partially a demand situation, which you talked about the kind of negative feelings in galleries among collectors. You also highlighted the sense that some really big people are not buying right now. And this was news to me. This was, I think, really kind of a powerful indicator of just how small the art industry is in some ways, that a few people sit out, it can really change how people operate. Talk us through that and what you found there.
So that was a surprise to me too. One of the people I talked to for the story was Beth Rudin-Duvudi, who is lovely and kind of consummate collector, right? So many galleries rely on her, and she's a collector of emerging art. So she is a real kind of a leader in this field. There aren't really that many people like her. And she supports a lot of galleries, she supports a lot of artists really early in her career. And then for galleries, like people have told me that, when they try to sell these artists' work later, they would say, oh, Beth bought it. And, so they use
A key
her kind of
tastemaker.
support. Yeah, she was a key tastemaker. And so she told me that she really scaled back and she's not buying really right now. And kind of similarly, I think, to what we said earlier, that every story of every gallery is a little different. It's very individual case, and that there are broader themes. And so in her case, there are reasons why she is not, it's not just because of pricing or the economy. I mean, she has personal reasons why she's not doing, but she is not in the market in the same way. And what it means, what really struck me about how one dealer thought about it, who worked with her for many years, is that it's not just the money, the amount of money she spends with the galleries, although that's also very, very important. But for collectors who follow her lead, they just don't know what to buy.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it, it's important. You don't want to buy something, not even from the value perspective, but just putting something on the wall that signals a wrong thing. I don't know. But so he said that the situation were rudderless, and that really struck me, because not only we're talking about a money outflow from the market, but there is really like no sense of direction aesthetically even. What is the next thing? Like, what is important? What is lasting, in terms of art right now? And then another very significant complaint that I've been hearing for the past 2 years is that the prices are just out of whack, like just completely out of whack. And I think people are just like really freaked out by it. Maybe they still have money to spend, but they just don't want to spend it.
Right.
And that's kind of has to do really with the resale market and the fact that the primary prices have gotten so high for many artists that they have no necessarily resale market. That's important to understand also, because we're not talking about, when we're saying the storm has come for the art market, like nobody is questioning the significance of art making. We are all art lovers, right? Like in one way or another, that's what nourishes us, what nourishes me. There's obviously no question that there will be artists, art will be made. Somebody is making art of the future. Somebody is making the work that is going to be very, very important right now somewhere. But structurally things are shifting. And the big question is like that bloat in my mind, right? Like based on my conversations and interviews, is that everybody says the same thing. It's just gotten too big. There are too many art fairs, there are too many galleries, there are too many artists, there are too many art consultants, and just the prices are too high. Like it's out of whack.
Yeah.
And collectors, even very seasoned collectors, are like on the sidelines. Another big kind of caveat and like a nuance in this dynamics is that a lot of collectors that galleries have come to rely on, like Beth Rudin-Duvudi, and another collector I spoke with for the article was Dean Valentine, talking about people who support emerging artists very early in their careers. There's an arc of collecting, right? Like early in the arc, you buy a lot, right? Towards the end, you buy less. It was interesting. I ran into Pamela Joyner yesterday at the opening of Nathaniel Mary Quinn at Gagosian in Chelsea. I asked her, do you buy as much? Because she used to buy a lot.
Sure.
And she said, no, she scaled back. But she said, like, now she's filling in the gaps of her collecting. Probably, she said that she spends as much money or more. She doesn't need as many pieces.
Right.
She said that she would have liked a painting by Nathaniel Mary Quinn, something she liked wasn't available. And she said, like, in his case, like, she would keep adding to her collection, but, just where she's in the arc of collecting. And I think that a lot of collectors, especially collectors who are older in their lives, they don't collect with as much zeal. And so the question is, who is coming up? And what is the next generation of collectors?
And that's something you've written about a fair amount, the sense of a generational shift and a real fear around the next generation perhaps not emerging to the same.
Right. That was our intelligence report cover last time around. It's just a moment of a lot of shifting. Is there a next generation of collectors? What do they want? What do they like? Will they like the same things? Will they invest in the same artists? Will Warhol and Jod and will these artists mean something to them? Or will they pay that much money for them as their predecessors? Maybe not. Like, they will make their own masters, but I feel like there are just a lot of questions and a lot of uncertainty about how that would look.
Massive uncertainty, this moment of just real upheaval. You have a line in the article that talks about there is this sense out there among advisors, among top-level people in the field, that there will be more closures, that there will be more. That's at least the feeling in the air. So a lot of bad news, but I'm also going to ask you, what are bright spots you see? Are there any positive indicators that you have seen, whether it's in the data, in the intelligence report, in your reporting? For instance, I know that some younger dealers get mentioned in your article that people are kind of looking to perhaps create some energy and build up the field again. But what do you see as positive indicators?
Well, I think that also, like, the younger generation, I caught up with Sebastian Gladstone, someone I've been watching this year. He came to New York, expanded, added a second location. He was based in LA and opened a space in Tribeca. I caught up with him because I really wanted, in my reporting, I tried to cast a very wide net, in terms of scales of the galleries and just to really understand the current situation. And he said that he's like fairly optimistic. He said he's doing well. There were a number of shows that sold out for him. I guess he's moving into a new space in LA and opening with this artist, kind of a forgotten Abex artist, Herman Cherry. Really beautiful. I don't know, I didn't think maybe color field, but sort of in that vein.
Adjacent. Yeah.
And adjacent. And he said that he sold out that show already like weeks before the opening that's coming up later this month. He said that there are galleries and younger dealers between like for the 20s to maybe mid 40s who are more like on the ground and who maybe don't have as big of an overhead. Maybe they have one or two staff members and maybe their rent is less expensive in many cases. And I think, it's the same story. Like, it's very generational. Like, they're more nimble, they're more scrappy. And so I feel like people who don't have high overhead right now can navigate through this system. But then on the other hand, I was reminded there are a lot of rumors in the market about Pace Gallery and what's happening there. And I kind of realized that maybe they stem from the fact that they just have a huge rent, fixed cost in the beautiful building in Chelsea. Last night, they had a huge opening for Robert Longo there, one of those rare parties. Like, it was a total gangbuster. They had actually a rock concert there.
There's a special aspect to it, right? Which I don't want to give away. What was the concert?
The opening of Robert Longo's show was followed by a live performance of Rhys Chatham with several musicians, which included Robert Longo and Mark Glimcher.
Love it.
Yes, and it was intense and very loud rock.
Wow.
And it kind of was amazing, but also strangely minimalist. I don't know. It was really, really cool. And then they threw a massive party on their terrace. Like, they went all out. And the work is amazing, I have to say. It's an incredible exhibition, and he is a master,
Legend, absolute legend. He has the whole building, right?
There are a couple of floors.
Okay.
But they're just amazing. It's like a museum exhibition. It's very impressive. You still have amazing works. I go to these openings and to these exhibitions to really recharge, both when separately, but to see Katie Nolan exhibition at Gagosian, wow, that was also really strong and kind of oddly mysterious. Like, I need to kind of make up my mind about
Weird show. Yeah.
a weird show, but I felt like one word that came to my mind when I was thinking about it yesterday was like there was so much testosterone in that show. And actually, the music at Pace, I felt like that would have been a great soundtrack for the Katie Nolan show at
Wow.
Gagosian.
Yeah.
But then I was also yesterday at Salon 94, and it has an amazing show of Urs Fischer with his sculptures and design objects. And what made me so happy, one of my all-time favorite artworks is his Rain
Mm-hmm.
installation, which I've seen for the first time at the Palazzo Grassi when it first opened. And it was kind of framed by the hanging heart of J.F. Koons. It was like this magenta hanging heart.
Beautiful.
And I just will never forget it. It was so beautiful and it was so extraordinary. And so anyway, so Urs Fischer now has the gold rain installed at Salon 94, which is also a historic building. It's absolutely irresistible. Those are, I guess, bright spots for me. But it's just that the next stretch, I think, is it may be very tough. I go back to again and again my interview with Olivier. He said that we all prepared for a tsunami of sales and expanded accordingly. And it's kind of a little old creek of sales.
Yeah.
And that is really, I feel like, at the core of structural
Yeah.
problem the art market faces. But while I was reporting this piece, it kind of became clear to me that the disconnect perhaps between auctions and the gallery segment right now. Not to say that auctions are doing great. Like their FT just had a story today about the drop in everything, at Sotheby's. But at the same time, auctions are kind of going around about their business, and there are a whole bunch of really exciting collections that are coming up. The names that are going to excite a lot of buyers. So I think that if they price things accordingly and if they don't give up all profit through guarantees and then selling off the works that they have guaranteed, like hopefully they'll be able to make some money. And I feel like the market is really looking to the next auction cycle for some direction.
Yes, and this is a perfect segue. So what I think you've captured nicely is it's been just a brutal summer. As you've said, we're entering the fourth year fundamentally of this slowdown, this contraction. You're out in Chelsea, ambitious shows are up. People are still interested. People are still swinging for the fences. Really just giant shows, right? Urs Fischer, Katie Nolan, Robert Longo, there's Richard Serra, there's Andres Suda. These are just giants who have passed away or are still making work or are just approaching the end of their careers, just doing remarkable things. And yes, you have the auctions coming up. And I guess predicting the future is a risky business. It's a fool's game. But I guess what I'm really interested in is what you're looking at to kind of get a sense of where we're going. And the auctions being a huge one. I mean, back in May in New York, we really didn't see big material, right? It was the Mondrian from Len Ricci's collection, beautiful little picture, sold, I believe, at the low end of the estimate in the 40-something million range. And we just didn't see the kind of blockbuster material we used to. Do you think we will come November, or what is that shaping up to look like?
There will be at least one work that I'm extremely excited about. The biggest one is Leonard Lauder.
Big.
And that would be extraordinary, I think. We know that he's given so much of his main passion, which is Cubism, to the Met. However, he was also a very serious collector of German Expressionism, and which is surprising, not surprising. Like his brother, Ron Lauder, of course, is best known for Neue Gallery and that collection, but Leonard Lauder also had some extraordinary work, including a very large portrait by Klimt. And that portrait is in the mix. That
Nice.
portrait will be a massive prize.
That's a huge deal, yeah.
It will be very exciting. And I feel like that kind of a trophy masterwork would really generate a lot of excitement in the market. And then other collection, which is interesting on contemporary front, the Edelis collection, some works from Edelis collections are coming up, including Maurizio Catalan's very famous sculpture of Hitler.
Wow.
So that would be another very significant work. Obviously, not as significant as Klimt price wise, but difficult, very difficult work. But the work that currently holds the auction record for Catalan, I think it's $16 million. There's a museum in Japan that's selling some of its collection, including an early Monet water lilies painting. There's a Pritzker collection that Sotheby's is going to announce at some point. And of course, Elaine Wynn's collection and Christie's.
Yeah.
Let's see what else. The Weiss collection and Christie's. So anyway, there are a lot of really good, high quality collections on the market. And hopefully that will generate some excitement and high prices.
That's really interesting. Something I was really curious about is back in May, we saw the much talked about Giacometti failing with a $70 million estimate. That did kind of, to some people, send a kind of chill through the market. That, of course, there was a lot of argument about that thing is overpriced. It was an overly ambitious thing. But your sense is, with this material coming up, if we see strong results, that could kind of energize the field to some degree. Because what I'm really curious about is, how do you get out of this? When does the storm break?
Malaise, right? This malaise.
Yeah, exactly. And it sounds like it takes time in part, right? The structure has to change, but maybe some great results at auction can juice people up.
I think so much of it is about psychology, right?
Yeah.
I think the market needs to hold on to something, right? Like right now, it's really up to the auction houses to get their estimates right. Like, this is not the time to be greedy. This is, I think, from what we've seen, the time to have realistic and conservative maybe estimates and get the market really bid up something to whatever the price is. Because otherwise, what really concerned me after May was the narrative has been for so many years that, if there's great material, there is demand. And the contraction in the auction market is because great collections maybe haven't come up because people have to die for something to come to auction. So one season they may have 5 collections, one season they have 2. It really is kind of unpredictable. What kind of made me very concerned about the Giacometti from the solo collection was that it is a great piece, unquestionably, and there were no takers for it. So to me, that signified that it's a problem not just of supply, but a problem of demand. Since then, I've talked to people in the market, and people say, okay, so it was very highly estimated. If it was 50 to 70, it would have been a different story. But at 70, it was just too aggressive. My understanding is that the auction houses are now negotiating with their consigners and trying to get those estimates right.
Nice. That was the sort of chatter around Wynn, I know, this week, that those were kind of chastened or more realistic numbers.
Right. And that would create more confidence, I think, in the market, right? That could translate into the rest of the market. And, something that I didn't really dwell on, but I heard a lot from collectors that I spoke with, was this idea that collecting art fundamentally is about your belief in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And your optimism about the future. And so the current pullback and in demand is kind of a reflection of this really sense of, I think, maybe hopelessness on a certain level, anxiety about the future, fundamentally. Hopefully, we'll see some strong signs from the upcoming auctions that would really break through that malaise and really kind of pull us out into a better place.
Absolutely. Yeah, it just speaks to how important art is, that it connects on that deep level psychologically with people. If you're not in a state of feeling good about things, you're also not going to want to engage with art necessarily in the same way. I guess a final question for you then. You've been pounding the pavement during the Armory Show and Independent and all these fairs. You were out in Chelsea, also uptown. It sounds like Urs Fischer show was great, but what else was great? What did you see? What's the absolute highlight for you so far as we're nearing the middle of September?
What I saw in Chelsea felt very strong and good. And it was interesting to see so many new galleries at the Armory. There were so many names I've never even heard. Ultimately, I think as difficult as this moment is, there are many, many opportunities. One of the interesting stories that I heard at the Armory and I wrote about in my column was about this small gallery from Dallas that got in like literally the last minute possible. It was invited when somebody else dropped out, and the dealer drove across the country to make the
Wild.
deadline and to actually come to the fair. He was invited 2 weeks before. That was his first Armory show, and it was really like an opportunity. You have to be nimble and be prepared. I think like there will be opportunities for many people, and for many galleries, this is the moment from which they will rise for the next decade or so. I'm hopeful overall, but it's just a difficult stretch.
Yeah. And that, I think, is such an important lesson, an important takeaway. Everyone should go and read Katya's column from September 5th. You wrote just that, about that this is the moment when we look back and we look at downturns, and the next great dealers, the next great artists arise from that. It's painful and it's sad because we see people go away and we see artists oftentimes disappear for stretches, but it does mean that a new crop comes in. And that's good. That's great for everyone, in the sense that we want art to be exciting and move forward.
Just to add to that, like I always remember I was at Bloomberg and I did a story about all these women-run galleries on the Lower East Side, and there's a whole like group of young female dealers, and they all opened in the fall of 2008.
Wow.
Which was the previous crash, right? And so that is very promising on one level. And the same thing, like all the collections that were built in a really horrible contraction of the early 1990s, like Glenstone, the Broad, like much of like the collecting was happening then. A lot of people are looking at auctions to find deals right now. I mean, pure liquid, this is a time to buy.
Yeah, historically, that's shown. Past results don't indicate future results, but it is true that we've seen this over and over. If you have the money and you bought in those down moments, you're a happy camper, even today.
Happy camper, because not only you may get a good price, but you also may get the material that would never otherwise become available.
Right. Hugely important. On that note, on that kind of clear-eyed but optimistic note, I think maybe let's close out. Katya, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
And everyone, please go to ArtNet News, which is news.artnet.com, download the intelligence report, and send feedback our way.
That's it for this week's episode. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. Also, take a moment to rate and review us. It will help other listeners discover what we're doing. The Art Angle is produced by Sonia Manalili, with contributions from Kate Brown, Ben Davis, Carolyn Goldstein, and Naomi Ray.